Introduction of characters. Introduce Claire, the wife, and James, her husband. They are in their mid-30s, living a seemingly perfect life in a cozy suburban home. Claire is a well-respected interior designer, and James is a lawyer. They've been married for 6 years. Their life together is stable but routine, with moments of love, but also a quiet, growing distance that Claire has been hiding beneath the surface. The affair begins. Introduce Mark, Claire's lover, a charming and adventurous man she met through work. The affair is relatively recent, beginning only a few months ago, and though Claire feels immense guilt, she gets caught up in the excitement and the passion of it. Her marriage with James has become emotionally distant, and she finds herself craving the connection she once had but lost along the way. Hints of trouble. James begins to notice Claire's odd behavior. She's late coming home sometimes, spends more time on her phone, and seems more distant than usual. Though he doesn't suspect an affair, he feels something is off and begins to ask questions. But Claire deflects or avoids the topic. This creates an emotional undercurrent of tension. The unplanned encounter. One evening, James decides to surprise Claire. He finishes work early and heads to the cafe where she said she'd be meeting a client. As he walks into the cafe, his eyes scan the room, but he doesn't expect to see what he sees next. Claire and Mark, in a secluded corner, are kissing passionately, completely oblivious to his presence. Ethan's rage. James stands frozen, the shock registering in his body. His heart stops for a beat, and then a wave of raw anger and betrayal rushes over him. His vision blurs with rage. He storms over to the table, grabbing Mark by the shirt and shoving him with all his strength. The impact sends Mark stumbling backward, and Claire's eyes go wide with horror. Claire's panic. Claire's panic sets in immediately. She stands up, shaking, her hands trembling. She tries to speak, but her words get tangled in the weight of her guilt. She pleads with James, calling his name, but he is already too far gone in his fury. Her chest tightens as she realizes how close she is to losing everything. She tries to calm him down, but nothing she says gets through. The devastation in James's eyes is enough to make her feel the full weight of the destruction she's caused. The emotional chaos. James, still trembling with fury, demands an explanation. His voice is low and filled with pain. How long, Claire? How long have you been doing this behind my back? Claire stumbles, her mind racing for the right words, but nothing seems enough to explain the inexplicable. She admits that she's been seeing Mark for the past 3 months and tries to explain that it's complicated, but James isn't listening. Claire's confession. Claire breaks down, admitting the full extent of her betrayal. She tells James how she had felt emotionally neglected for months, that their relationship has started to feel more like a routine than a partnership. Mark's presence was exciting and fresh, and for a time she justified her actions in her own mind. But now, faced with the consequences, she realizes the gravity of her choices. She is truly sorry, but she knows that the damage may be irreparable. James's pain. James's reaction is one of disbelief and gut-wrenching sadness. He never imagined Claire would betray him this way. He demands to know why. Why she didn't come to him first, why she didn't talk to him about their issues. He feels lost, betrayed, and utterly broken. The trust they had built over 6 years feels like a distant memory now. The pain of the betrayal is suffocating, and he questions everything about their marriage. The fallout. The conversation between Claire and James is heated and emotional. James accuses her of destroying everything they had built. Claire, now fully aware of the depth of the devastation, tries to apologize and explains that she never intended for things to get this far, but the words fall flat. James tells her he can't look at her the same way anymore. He leaves, telling her he needs time to process everything. Claire's despair. The next few days are a blur for Claire. James moves out of their shared bedroom and she's left alone, grappling with the emotional consequences of her actions. She's consumed with guilt and sorrow, but also anxiety over whether she will ever be able to repair the damage. She tries to call James multiple times, but he doesn't answer. Her whole world feels like it's crumbling. James's reflection. Meanwhile, James is processing the shock of his wife's betrayal. He goes through a range of emotions: anger, heartbreak, confusion, and numbness. He can't understand how he didn't see the signs. He feels foolish and humiliated. But beneath all of this, there's also a deep sorrow for the loss of the woman he loved and for the life they had built together. Claire's desperation. After a few days of isolation, Claire reaches out to Mark. She knows she shouldn't, but she needs someone to talk to, someone who won't judge her. Mark is kind and understanding, but it's clear that their affair was never meant to be long-lasting. He's also feeling the aftermath of the mess they've created. And while he still cares for Claire, he knows it's time to step away. He doesn't want to be the cause of further destruction. Claire's apology. Claire decides that if she truly wants to save her marriage, she has to fight for it. She writes James a heartfelt letter, detailing her sorrow, explaining her actions, and begging him to allow her the chance to make things right. She acknowledges that what she did was unforgivable, but that she's committed to doing whatever it takes to rebuild the trust and love they once shared. James's decision. After days of struggling with his emotions, James finally agrees to meet with Claire. He's still angry, still hurt, but there's a part of him that isn't ready to let go of their marriage. He listens as Claire apologizes and promises to change. She wants to seek counseling, to work on herself, and to work on their marriage. But James isn't sure if he can ever trust her again. He asks her for time, space to figure out if he can forgive her. Healing takes time. Over the course of the next few months, Claire and James attend marriage counseling together. It's a painful journey filled with difficult conversations and many tears. But slowly, they begin to rebuild their connection. Claire does the hard work of addressing her emotional needs, being open and vulnerable with James in ways she hadn't been before. James, too, has to learn how to trust again, which is an uphill battle. The future. While their marriage is still fragile, Claire and James are learning to move forward. They don't have all the answers, but they're working on it together. The affair has forever changed their relationship, but it's not the end. Both of them know that healing is a long process, and there will be many bumps along the way, but they're willing to take that journey together. Closing moment. The story ends with Claire and James walking hand in hand down a quiet street, their future uncertain, but their hearts slowly starting to heal. There is hope, but also a deep understanding that rebuilding trust takes time. The path forward is unknown, but for now, they are taking it one step at a time. Together, as the months rolled by, the weight of the past was never fully forgotten, but the sharpness of the pain had begun to dull. Claire and James, though still fragile, were working hard to rebuild the life they once had, step by step. Marriage counseling had proven more challenging than either of them had expected. But with each session, they began to understand each other better. Claire, for the first time, opened up fully about her emotions, the loneliness she had felt in the marriage, the way she had slowly disconnected from James. She explained how she had justified the affair, but she knew now that it was a way of avoiding dealing with the cracks in their relationship. She wasn't proud of what she had done, but she was finally being honest about the way she had felt. James listened, his emotions still raw, but gradually learning to hear her out. For a long time, he had internalized the hurt and anger, believing he had been abandoned by his wife. The affair had rocked him to the core, but slowly, through Claire's honesty and their counseling sessions, he began to understand that it wasn't just the affair that had caused the damage. It had been years of growing emotional distance, unspoken needs, and unresolved issues. They both had to take responsibility for their part in the breakdown of their relationship. For James, it meant recognizing his own shortcomings, his workaholic tendencies, his neglect of Claire's emotional needs, and his failure to see the signs of her unhappiness. For Claire, it was about admitting that she had not communicated her pain and frustrations and instead had turned to someone else to fill the void. Though it was difficult, they were learning to navigate this new dynamic together. There were still moments of tension, and both of them had to fight against the urge to shut down when the past crept back into their conversations. But the commitment was there. They both wanted to rebuild what they had lost. As spring began to settle over their city, a new challenge emerged. One evening, after a counseling session, Claire and James decided to attend a dinner party hosted by a close friend of theirs. Claire had been hesitant about going, feeling the weight of their history still hanging over her. Yeah, but James encouraged her, assuring her that they could face this together. The evening began as a normal social event. Chatter, laughter, a few drinks. But things took a sharp turn when Mark, Claire's lover, appeared at the party. Claire froze, her stomach turning as she saw him enter. He was with a group of mutual friends, and Claire's heart rate quickened. She had not seen him since the moment she and James confronted him in the cafe months ago. James didn't notice at first, his attention distracted by the conversation he was having with a colleague. But Claire's body language, stiff and tense, gave it away. When he turned and followed her gaze, he saw Mark standing across the room, laughing with a group of people. His gut tightened, and the old anger, though dulled, surged inside him once more. Claire immediately tried to defuse the situation, excusing herself from the group and stepping outside onto the balcony to collect herself. But James was right behind her, his brow furrowed with confusion and concern. Claire, his voice was quiet but laced with suspicion. Why is he here? I didn't know, she said, her voice shaking. I didn't invite him. I didn't even know he'd be coming. I'm sorry. James ran a hand through his hair, trying to process what he was feeling. He had come so far, and now this felt like a punch in the gut. The emotions he thought he had managed to control were rising up again, and he struggled to push them back. Do you want to leave? He asked, his voice tight. Claire hesitated. She didn't want to make this harder than it already was. But she knew that facing Mark in front of everyone would only add to the tension. She didn't want to hurt James again. Not now, not after everything they had worked through. Maybe it's best if we do, Claire replied softly, her eyes pleading for understanding. James nodded, his jaw set. Let's go. They left the party early, and as they drove back to their apartment, The silence in the car was heavy. James's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed ahead. Claire, though remorseful, couldn't shake the feeling that her past was still lurking around every corner. When they got home, they didn't immediately go to bed. Instead, they sat down in the living room, each trying to collect their thoughts. James spoke first. "You're not seeing him anymore, right?" he asked, his voice low, tinged with a mix of frustration and hurt. Claire took a deep breath. "No, James, I haven't seen him since that day. I swear, I ended it for good." James looked at her, his gaze searching for sincerity. "I just don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this. You've said you're committed to making this work, but I'm struggling to get past everything." "I know," Claire whispered. "I know it's hard, but I swear to you, I want this. You, more than anything. I never wanted to hurt you, James. And I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just want a chance to show you that I can make it right." James exhaled slowly, trying to process. "You hurt me, Claire, more than you'll ever know. But I'm trying. I really am. I don't know if I can ever fully forget what happened, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to work with you." The months following that evening were filled with intense emotional work. The road to recovery was slow, but both Claire and James had committed to the process. Claire continued attending therapy to work through her feelings of guilt and to explore why she had made the choices she did. James, on the other hand, struggled to trust again, but was dedicated to trying. He sought individual therapy to work through his own issues with forgiveness. They still attended marriage counseling together, and it became a space where they could both express their frustrations and needs. James often admitted that he was still haunted by the betrayal, but with time, he began to rebuild his trust in Claire. And Claire, knowing how much damage her actions had caused, did everything in her power to prove her commitment to him, to their marriage, and to their future. One evening, several months after the party, they sat together on the couch, no longer the couple they had been before, but something stronger. They were different now. Their relationship marked by the scars of their past, but also by the growth they had both undergone. "I know it's not easy," Claire said softly, her head resting on James's shoulder. "But I feel like we're finally getting somewhere." James nodded, his hand gently squeezing hers. "Yeah, it's still hard, and I still have my doubts, but I feel like we're getting through this together. And that's more than I could have hoped for." As they sat there, the weight of the past still lingering but not suffocating them, they realized that though their journey wasn't over, they were no longer defined by the mistakes they had made. Their love, though tested, was still there, stronger, more resilient than it had ever been. It had been nearly a year since the night James found out about Claire's affair. The road to healing had been rocky, filled with moments of doubt, tears, and painful confrontations. But there had been small victories along the way, moments where they realized they could still love each other, where they could still rebuild what had been broken. Claire had changed. She had become someone who no longer relied on distractions or kept her pain hidden. She had learned to communicate her emotions openly with James. And though it had been difficult at first, their relationship had started to shift. She no longer saw him as someone who would always be there, someone to take for granted. Instead, she saw him as a partner, someone she needed to care for, nurture, and cherish. James, too, had changed. He had come to understand that forgiveness was not a one-time thing. It wasn't a magic word that could fix everything. Forgiveness was a process, a slow and difficult journey. But he had realized that he wanted to move forward, not just for Claire, but for himself. He didn't want to live in the shadow of betrayal forever. Together, they were learning to live again, to love again. But it hadn't been easy. Claire's struggle with guilt is, even though Claire had worked hard to make amends, there were still moments when the weight of her guilt became unbearable. She would lie awake at night, her mind replaying the moment she kissed Mark, the lie she told James, and the devastation she caused. Sometimes the fear of losing James forever crept back into her thoughts, and she would wonder if this was a wound too deep to heal. It wasn't just her own guilt that haunted her, but the fear of seeing James suffer every day. She had seen his pain in his eyes so many times, the silent moments when he thought she wasn't looking. But there were also moments of tenderness, like when they laughed over something silly or when he reached for her hand during dinner. In those moments, she saw the glimmer of the man she had once known and the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other completely. But the guilt lingered, quietly poisoning her thoughts, making her question if she truly deserved the chance she had been given. James's battle with trust. For James, the hardest part of the past year had been learning how to trust Claire again. There were moments when he would catch himself wondering if she was hiding something again, if she had found someone else to confide in. He didn't know how to stop the paranoia from creeping in. He didn't know how to stop the feeling that the rug could be pulled out from under him once more. At times, he would get angry with himself for not being able to let go of the hurt. Why couldn't he forgive her completely? Why couldn't he just trust her the way he once had? But deep down, he knew trust wasn't something you could rebuild in an instant. It wasn't something that could be forced. It would take time. It would take more than just words, more than just promises. It would take consistency. It would take seeing Claire's commitment in the small everyday moments, just as he needed to show her his own commitment, not just in grand gestures, but in his actions. A moment of healing. One evening, after work, Claire suggested they go for a walk. It had become a small ritual for them, a quiet time where they could share their thoughts and simply enjoy each other's company. James agreed, and they walked hand in hand through the park near their home. It was a peaceful night, the air cool, the trees casting long shadows, the sound of distant city traffic fading into the background. Claire turned to James, noticing the softness in his expression. "Do you remember when we first moved in together?" she asked, her voice gentle. James smiled, nodding. "Of course. I still remember you spending hours picking out furniture and arguing with me about the perfect shade of paint for the living room." Claire chuckled, the memory a sweet reminder of how far they had come. "I remember you being frustrated with how long it all took. You wanted everything settled in one day." James laughed. "I didn't understand why you were so particular about things, but I see it now. You were building something that was supposed to last." They stopped walking, standing at the edge of a small pond in the park. The moonlight reflected on the water, casting a soft glow. James turned to face her, taking both of her hands in his. "I'm not going to lie and say that everything's perfect," he said softly. "I still struggle with trust sometimes. I still get angry when I think about what happened. But I love you, Claire. I love you in a way that's different now. It's deeper, maybe, more complicated, but it's real. And I'm willing to fight for us." Tears filled Claire's eyes as she looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. James, I'm so sorry for everything. I can't take back what I've done, but I promise you, I'm not going anywhere. I'm committed to making this right. I'm committed to you. James gently wiped away a tear from her cheek, his touch tender. I know you are, Claire.